and will explain a little more during this talk. Kate has worked with a variety of organisations, ranging from universities to tech firms to financial services. She's also the author of The Confident Manager and The Presentation Workout. As a shy Lincolnshire lass from a farming background, Kate never dreamt that she would have the knowledge and expertise that would make her in demand as a professional speaker today. Speaking to us on success, what lies behind the mask, understanding and overcoming the imposter syndrome, please welcome Kate Atkin.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. And as I said to you during the course of the sort of little bit of a welcome earlier, you are more than welcome to get in touch. There's a dedicated web page where you'll be able to download a copy of the slides from there as well in PDF format if you're interested in any specific bits on the slides. Don't feel that you have to take notes from that perspective. But if you've got questions you want to ask during the session, those of you on Zoom, feel free to ask them as well in the chat, because what we've got online also, Callum will be monitoring those questions that come through in the chat and will then voice them into the room, so I can also answer those if they come through. And questions that are raised but not answered during the session, if there's something else, I can add it to the web page. So the dedicated web page is a resource that can be updated after today. So if you've got other things you're saying, well, actually, Kate, what about X? I can add some of those into the web page. So feel free to raise your questions and your discussions and make it interactive. And so for those of you on Zoom too, you will also be invited into breakout rooms for short periods of time. It's not a huge amount, but those of you in the room, I'd like to give you the opportunity on a couple of occasions just to speak to each other about this as well. So you're having an opportunity to make it a little bit interactive. And from that perspective, I'd like to just set a couple of ground rules. And what's happened on the clicker front is that the mouse has moved, I think, to the wrong place. So let me just see. Oh, there we go. It's gone. A couple of ground rules. The first ground rule is one of confidentiality. So I'll just check that this is going to move on, because it hasn't. There we go. Yay. I think I might need to point it there. So confidentiality and kindness. This is a very personal topic. For some people, it's a really deeply personal topic. For others, it's something that's just a little bit of a light topic, and you've come here out of interest. For others, some of you may be going, I think I really experience this. And actually, most people go, I suffer from it, Kate. And I'll explain a little bit more about why I don't think people suffer from the imposter phenomenon. We need to channel the Muppets song. Do you know the Muppets? So it's phenomenon. You can then say phenomenon more easily. Sorry, that's about the only joke I've got, but it's one. So confidentiality and kindness. What you hear other people say, or what you read in the chat, for those of you who are on Zoom, from other people, remains confidential. So going away from this session, you know, oh, did you know so-and-so attended that session on da-da-da? So you're not saying that, but what you pick up and what you learned from this session absolutely does not need to stay confidential. So it's other people's stuff that does, your learning doesn't. And kindness is something that we tend to afford to other people. We tend to give them kindness and respect when we have conversations with them. Sometimes we're not quite so kind to ourselves inside our heads. So my invitation to you is to be kind to yourselves inside your head during the course of this session as well. And perhaps a little bit curious if something sort of triggers and you're going, I go, that's interesting. And be curious about what's going on the inside for yourselves. So if we have a look at the structure, if you wish to, I would dearly love this to make a difference to you from a personal perspective. And if you wish to take some notes, there are some pens, some of you picked them up as you came through, and there are some postcards. So for those of you who are in the room, you can use the postcards if you wish to, divide it into 4 boxes on the back, and take some notes in the stop, start, think about and carry on structure. So there may be some things that you would like to take away with the aha moments. And yeah, grab a pen if you need one. For those of you who are online, obviously, if you've got a pen to hand, great. If you want to take notes in another electronic format, that's also fine. Andrew, could you pass a pen? Just check and see if anyone else in the room needs pens. We'll just pass a few around. So thank you for that. So that is a stop, so I'll just go back. Stop, start, think about, and carry on. So stop, start, think about, and carry-on structure. It's a very simple 4-box thing. Lots of people miss a carry-on box, and I think sometimes we don't realise what we're actually doing to support ourselves that works well. So if we can do that and add in anything into the carry-on box that you think is appropriate, then feel free to do so. So that's the structure I'm suggesting. Now, for those in the room, can I invite you to stand on your feet? For those of you who are in Zoom, could I invite you to use either a thumbs up or thumbs down emoji? And Callum, if you could just spot how many we've got from a thumbs up, thumbs down perspective, because I'm going to show you this quote by Henry Ford. And Henry Ford has said, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. If you agree with what Henry Ford has said, stay standing. If you disagree with him, please feel free to sit down. And in the Zoom room, if you agree with him, would you like to give a thumbs up? And if you disagree, would you like to find a thumbs down or any other emoji that you think equates to your thinking at this point? So we have anybody in the room that would like to sit down at this point? I've got a couple of you. And sort of, now we're having popcorn sitting down. So it's like a little bit of a, oh, is it okay? So sit down if you disagree, stay standing if you agree. Okay. So we've got about 50%, and now we've got more sitting. It's like others have sat down. I think maybe I'll sit down. Am I right? It's really interesting whether or not you agree or disagree with Henry Ford. And I will tell you why. In 2013, I suddenly went, maybe Henry Ford is wrong. So please feel free to sit down. And what did we get on Zoom? Did we get some thumbs ups and thumbs downs? Thumbs ups from most. Okay, lovely. So a little bit more of that introduction to me. Growing up, I'm the middle one of 3 girls, brought up on a farm in rural Lincolnshire. And what happened was in Lincolnshire, when you have a farming background, and my dad, traditional farmer, 3 girls, a bit disappointed I wasn't the boy. I would have been called Eric. And he then expected us, unwritten rule really, was the expectation that you would marry a farmer and produce boys. None of us have. So it didn't quite work out from that perspective. So I've done something more than was expected, but in a slightly different way, because my older sister and younger sister both went to what that time was called a grammar school. So in the traditional Yonks-old, and some parts of the UK schooling still has it, there's an 11+ exam that you take, which says if you are academic and clever, you go off to the grammar school. If you're deemed to be practical, you go to the local secondary modern. I'm the one of the 3 that failed that exam. So I am not academic, I am not clever. And so I didn't go to university, and I don't have a first degree. And in 2012, I got accepted at the University of East London to study for a master's in positive psychology, which I would never have done, never have applied to do, had my husband not given me a really big nudge by writing the application for me and writing my personal statement, which I know you're not supposed to do. And so I actually postponed my entry till 2013, because I didn't know enough about psychology. I needed to read up about it. I needed to get a bit more information before I felt good enough to go. Turned up at university. Natural question from your fellow students when you turn up at university in your latter years is, what's your first degree in? I don't have one. So it felt very much like a confession. And I felt very much like this fish out of water. I shouldn't be here. I don't belong. It was a really beautiful multicultural part of London to go and study in, but coming again from rural Lincolnshire, that multiculturalness is not something that you experience in the back of beyond, which is now where I've moved back to. And it's such a lovely place to be, but it's very different. And it's sometimes that difference that can trigger these imposter feelings that says, do I fit here? Because this isn't what my life was supposed to look like, but it somehow has panned out that way. And I came across during the course of my master's some research by Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes on the imposter phenomenon in high-achieving women. It's like, And I read it and went, oh yes, tick, 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 that's so me. And I realised that I'd been experiencing this for many years, probably since my teenage years, and I'd realised that my own personal experience had been such that I'd created, unknowingly, but I'd created my own severe stomach aches since my teenage years. And now I know more about the phenomenon, and I'll explain why it's not a syndrome. I very rarely get a tummy ache. It's like, oh, that's interesting. And some people now that have told me about their own different physical symptoms. One lady that I've spoken to gets really bad pins and needles when she feels like an imposter, and she gets this experience. And it's triggered from some sense of anxiety. But I researched this for my MSc dissertation, and I got a distinction, both for my first ever academic essay and for the master's as a whole. And my husband then said, PhD next? So I'm now in my 6th and final year of a part-time PhD, looking at the imposter phenomenon in the world of work. So I know a little bit about this topic, okay? And it's been a fascinating personal and professional journey, because I've heard 21 wonderful voices, 5 men and the rest were women, to tell me about their experiences much more in depth about it, to read up a lot of other research. For those of you who've already got your PhDs, congratulations, because I have to say it's a hell of an achievement. It's a hell of a lot of work to get there, is it not? That's the thing. It's an awful lot of work to get to that level. And it's been really interesting along the way to study this. So this is why I think Henry Ford might be wrong. Because from my personal experience, it was the can't, possibly, no way. And yet I have. And for some of you maybe also in the room is like, do I really fit there? Can I really do that? Should I really be doing this? You already are doing it. And so whether you think you can or think you can't, I'm just going to suggest that you may be wrong. So take the quote. It's a very good quote for getting out of your comfort zone, for giving your confidence a boost, but confidence is the perceived ability to succeed at a given task. And it's like, so I think I can, I'll have a go at this. That's confidence, and that can be really helpful. But the imposter chatter goes, yeah, can you really? And it's sort of on the back of your, to me it's on my shoulder, in the back of my head, and it sort of holds you back a little bit. So let's just explore what this is and what it isn't. So it's not actually about being an imposter. Clance and Dimes called it an imposter in their article back in 1978, and they termed it imposter phenomenon because it's an occurrence at certain points in time, and because people were telling them that they felt like a fraud. These were PhD students, and these were faculty in the university where they were also working. And so they did a piece of research, looked at this and why it occurs. And we're sort of looking at it, the interesting thing with this is that it's now getting very much muddled with something else that is very normal to have, and that is normal self-doubt, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But the thing with this is about not being an imposter, it's about feeling like an imposter. Despite, and the key thing here is despite the external evidence of success. But the external evidence gets dismissed if it doesn't match up with your internal perception of yourselves. Because as human beings, generally speaking, we like to be right. We don't want to be wrong about things. And generally speaking, if we've got a perception of ourselves, it's really hard to update it and to change that self-perception. So the idea that I'm going to throw to you today is to think about, does your perception match the reality? Or could you update your perception of yourself? Because the external evidence is there, going, am I being a tad arrogant in dismissing the external evidence and not accepting it on myself? Because lots of people tell me they hold on to their imposter feelings to stay humble. And I would argue that actually that's not a matter for humility. We'll come back to that. So feel free, if you've got questions as we go through, put your hands up. And if you've got questions online, feel free to put those into the chat. Callum will keep an eye on that and will voice them to me should you have some. But what's happening in the media is really bugging me because they're terming it a syndrome. People are suffering from this syndrome. It's like, no, syndrome has a pathological connotation. It is not a mental health condition in and of itself. And they're also confusing it with normal self-doubt. So somebody does something for the first, second, or third time. You haven't yet built this track record of success. You haven't yet built your confidence up. And you're going, I wonder if I can do this. Oh, woe is me, I've got the imposter syndrome. I go, no, that is normal, healthy self-doubt. Imposter phenomenon is an occurrence at certain points in time. Maybe it's certain meetings, certain people, certain experiences that you have during the course of the working day. Or maybe it's not at work at all, and maybe it's outside as a parent, as a sibling, as a son or a daughter. You know, maybe that's when you experience it. So it's experiencing it at certain points in time, but it's not the same as normal self-doubt. That, I think, prevents arrogance and hubris and is really healthy to have. So what it does, and we'll just talk a little bit about the imposter feelings, it can prevent this sense of acknowledging your knowledge, your skills and experiences. So it actually stops you from recognizing that you have built up capability over time, because you've gone, oh no, that doesn't match with my experience. I'm only A, or I'm just A. And we tend to think of ourselves in our past experiences. It can also stop people putting themselves forward for promotion or new tasks. So you don't go for a new opportunity. You don't say, oh, I'd like to do that bit of research. I'd like to be involved in that project. It's like, it's not my place to put myself forward. I wait to be invited. And even if you're invited to do something, some people go, oh, no, that's not me. I'm not ready to do that yet. Is that a little bit of chuckle of recognition in the middle row there? It looks like. Is there any chuckle of recognition going online as well? Because it's interesting when I say these things, some people go, oh, yeah, that's me. And that's okay. That seriously is okay. So it also, the thing that I think is the biggest problem with this is the high levels of stress and anxiety that it can cause. And I think we could do with a little less stress in our lives. And if we can dismiss some of the imposter feelings by accepting what you can do and how good you are at some things, and knowing full well that you're not good at others, then I think that is really healthy. And that's what my encouragement is for you during the course of this session, to start to think about that. So what we're going to do next is a little bit of an overview and thinking about what's your experience. So again, those in the room, if you'd like to stand up, and those in the Zoom room, if you'd like to do something slightly different. So in the Zoom, would you like to put your answers, whether it's A, B, C, or D? And in the room, just have a read through these and decide which one is yours. And I'll ask you to do a vote with standing up, sitting down in a moment. So if you are an A, you're thinking about, yes, you've personally experienced it, but it hasn't held you back. So yes, it's been there, but I've pushed through it anyway, despite maybe some levels of stress or anxiety. I've gone on and still done things. Sometimes some people get held back by this. So actually, if you experienced it and it's held you back, then you'd be a B. Other people don't experience it. It's not a universal experience for everybody. It is a very common experience, but not universal. So if you've not experienced it, but you know somebody who has, you're a C. And if none of the above applies, you would put D into the chat. So if you'd like to keep an eye on what's coming through as prevalence in the chat there, Callum, that would be great. Now, if you are a D in the room, would you like to sit down? So you're already sitting down, don't worry, that's okay. So you were already sitting down. I wasn't going to count you in. Okay, we've got nobody sitting. You'll think none of the above for you. Okay, that's interesting, but I'll ask you to stand up again. Because if you now look, do you know some of the people in the room? Yeah, well, they're all still standing. So C is most likely to apply to you. So maybe you haven't experienced it, but you do know others who have. But the interesting thing is what you see on the outside of people is really successful, really capable, really competent, really confident outsides. And they don't know that it's going on, that the imposter feelings are on the inside. So D's are most likely, in reality, C's, and that's okay. So thank you so much for that. So you could, by all means, now sit down if you're a C. So have you got any C's in the Zoom room? No? Got any D's? No? Okay. So let's look around the room now. Just have a look around. We've got everybody bar one standing in the room. Have you got A's and B's put into the chats? How many A's, how many B's? Roughly. Have you got more A's or more B's, do you think? More B's. Okay. Do we want to have them? Should we have more B's in the room? Do you want to do a hand up? You B's? Yeah, we've got more B's in the room. Everybody can sit down. Everybody can sit down. Thank you so much. And that's really just to give you a sense of how common this is. You've come as a select audience as well. So you've chosen to come because you're interested in this topic, maybe for, again, your personal recollection and how can you overcome it for yourselves, which is fine. So let's just see how common it is in research. Academic research indicates, one piece of academic research indicates, and everybody quotes this, 70% at some point in their lives will experience this phenomenon. Men and women, now this is binary academic research I do have to put out there. They haven't done academic research in the non-binary specifically. Oh, let's look at that category. But in binary academic research, men and women experience this roughly equally. Tend to deal with it slightly differently. Social scientists indicate that men push forward, so men are perhaps more likely to be A's, but experience some stress as a result and sometimes even lead to burnout because they'll push forward anyway, despite, whereas sometimes women will hold themselves back more and not put themselves forward for that promotion or new tasks. So that's a bit of the black and white side of things. I do take that very much with a pinch of salt because we're not black and white. We're all wonderful shades of Can we say we're shades of grey? I'm not sure we can now we've had that book out, but you know what I mean, don't you? And that aspect of just thinking about whether or not it does apply to you on that personal level. So here's some thoughts that, again, you might recognise some of those thoughts that are going through your heads. So it can prevent people from recognising knowledge, skills and capabilities, which means that sometimes when we get a yes, success, fantastic, that's what I really wanted. Oh, and mine's always a leap in my tummy. Can I follow through on that next time? So if you get a grant, yes, got it. Yes, we've got the results we want. Yes, I've got a paper published. Now what's going to happen? Can I follow up with that? Can I achieve that again? So sometimes that can be one of the feelings that we have, a desire for success, but it's like a cycle which follows the, can I do it again? And then we have it hard to accept compliments or praise. So if you do get compliments or praise, somebody tells you that you've done a really good job, or somebody tells you how amazing you are. And can I please say one thing now? Stop telling people that they're amazing. Even if you do work with some truly amazing people, and I'm sure you do, don't tell them they're amazing, because it can make the imposter feelings even worse. But we will come back to what you can do and what you can tell them, okay? So if we've got this praise, if it doesn't meet with your internal perception, just gets discounted, just gets deleted, or we distort it. And, everybody would say that, wouldn't they? They'd say that to everybody. It's not nothing particular to me. So there's also a dread of being evaluated. When you put a paper up for peer review, it's like, what are they going to say? I'm dreading my Viva, to be perfectly honest. I seriously am. It's like, this is the point where they're going to find out I haven't done it properly. And something like, it's going to come out of my mouth and it's going to be this big hole I'm going to put myself in, and it's going to be dreadful. This time next year, you'll be able to know whether or not it was successful or was dreadful. But it's that piece, sometimes this dread of being evaluated. An annual appraisal in the workplace. One of my research participants, when I asked her when she experiences this, every time I meet with my manager, and that was a weekly meeting, she thinks that she's going to get told she's not doing her job properly and she's going to be found out. So for some, it's really regular. For others, it's a little bit of a light touch. And then there's sometimes this, I worry how much, that others will know how much I don't know. So I should know this. I should know the answer to this question. And sometimes in this wonderful online hybrid world, we have the opportunity to quickly Google the answer to the question that we want to ask. If somebody's using an acronym or somebody's talking about something, you think, I should know this, we can look it up rather than show the fact that we don't know something. So we don't, it's called in academic terminology, employee voice. We don't hear people's voices as much as we could. And organisations then are missing out on the talent. We're missing out on the creativity opportunities. We're missing out on the discussions and the brainstorming opportunities to have that opportunity to connect, to talk things through and be more creative in that way, because we're not daring to ask the questions. So if we think about where it might come from, think about, what have I done now? Oh, no, that's right. It's like, God, that's bright in my eyes. I'm going to move over here just for a second. Yeah, I thought I'd done something, set it all white. But yes, I have. Big white screen. So where does it come from? Before I go into that, what I'd like to give you, could you just do a breakouts for 3 minutes on the Zoom? Would that be okay, Callum? Thank you. And so before you send them there, if you could just get it set up, I'll just explain what we're doing. So I'd just like you to have a quick 3-minute conversation with each other to say, what's been your experience? So remember the confidentiality, remember the kindness, and pair up or make a 3, that's absolutely fine. So have the opportunity, if Andrea, you would mind moving over, have the opportunity to talk to each other. In the Zoom rooms, you'll have about 4 people roughly invited into that room. And just think about your own experiences. Have you experienced this? When? And where do you think it's come from for you? Okay? So we'll do 3 minutes. I'll tell you when to bring that to a close, if that's all right, Callum. Yeah, thank you. Over to you, just for a bit of quiet moments, internal discussions. Oh, that's fine, leave it. Leave it. They've only got 60 seconds left now. Just leave it, it's fine. Don't worry. Oh.
I wasn't sure how to.
You can in... It
I was
doesn't
just
matter.
trying to move it about now, but it doesn't seem like.
No, don't worry. It said breakout rooms are going to close in 60 seconds. So don't, we're just...
Sorry, it's been a bit of a.
It's okay. You can in breakout rooms, you can have it exclude host or...
I didn't realise.
Don't worry. Have we got... Oh, you see, she's on her own. That's the only thing. And they haven't joined. And Simon's with us. So, no, don't worry. Next time, just make one big...
Okay, should I just close?
Yep. Yeah. Sorry. So Marcus is there on his own. Hello, Marcus, I can see you. And you're like, oh, God, I'm embarrassed because I'm in the big picture now, aren't you? Don't worry. Would you like to put into... We can hear you as well. If you've got anything to comment on in the chat, the Zoom, the breakouts didn't quite work in Zoom, unfortunately, so I'm really sorry about that. But not to worry. Okay, have we got them closed?
It's just closing in 30 seconds. I don't know how to.
No, it doesn't. You just have to wait for the countdown. Yeah. It's fine. That's fine. So Marcus has turned his camera off now. Oh, we're the only person in the meeting. We shouldn't be the only person in the meeting. Oh, he's left our room. I think that's what it means.
Yeah, just
You
like
can
10
press.
10 seconds.
Yeah. Okay, 10 seconds and the Zoom meetings will return to the main room. There we go. So those of you in the main room can hear this. If you would like to bring your discussions to a close. Thank you so much. Now, sadly, I think, I'm not quite sure, in the Zoom rooms, it didn't quite work in the way in which we had hoped for those of you who are online. But if we get the chance to have another go, we will do it again in a short while. But if it doesn't work, we'll keep the people in Zoom in the main room, and we will just give you the chance to do your conversations in the chat. So for those of you here in the room, don't worry about the lighting. Callum's going to sort it out in a second, and as well as getting the slides back up. There we go. You're now in light again. Thoughts from the discussions that you did have. I don't want to know what you were discussing, but what I would like to know is how did you feel about having the discussions? Anybody willing to share how they felt about having the discussions? Vulnerable, absolutely. Yeah. Vulnerable. It's a weird thing to talk about to others, isn't it? Yeah. Yes, because it's a feeling and you maybe not thought about, how do I express this? What stuff's going on? Yeah, lovely, thank you. So quite difficult to put it into words. Anything else anybody wants to say about how you felt having those discussions? Quite common. Yeah, so you're having a discussion and going, so it's not just me. Yeah? It's that recognition of the fact that you're not alone in this. And the only time really good recognition that you're not alone is when you have a discussion with somebody else about it. So one of the ways in which we can really help, if this now works, thinking about where it comes from, one of the things we can do is to start to talk about it, is to start to have the conversations. But where did it come from? Does anything sort of spring out on there from your perspective? You don't have to say, you can just give me some good nods or thumbs up if you want to from the Zoom perspective. But think about childhood messages and parenting styles. So my background will be very different from many of yours. I don't know if anybody else, did anybody here have a farming upbringing? Yes, farming upbringing, yeah. Were you supposed to be a farmer rather than a scientist? Oh, okay, fortunately not, you said. Okay, cool. But it's really interesting, isn't it, how sometimes... Did you have an older sibling that went off and did the farming, or...? No. Okay, you're the oldest. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else do something different from what was expected? So childhood messages, parenting styles. So the parenting style sometimes is that you can do anything you want to, darling. You'll be great at whatever you choose to do. And one lady that I spoke to in the City of London was having that sort of parenting style, and she failed her driving test. And she was floored through failure because she'd been told she could do anything. Parenting style that I got was hypercritical rather than hyper-supportive. And it was sort of nothing was quite good enough. So you come home from primary school, 8 out of 10 in your spelling test. It's like, which 2 did you get wrong? So, yeah, recognition in the room. Okay, recognition in the Zoom room, maybe, on that sort of thing. The hypercritical parenting style is, and then the aspect of do your best. How do you know when you've done your best? You can always work more, can't you? So sometimes, do your best is like your best will be great. I've got to keep working. I've got to keep working. And therefore, we've got to be perfect to be loved. You're human. I'm sorry, but you're not perfect. We'll come on to that point. But this aspect, sometimes the parenting style can trigger. For some people, not for everybody, but for some. My older sister got the academic label. My younger sister got the chatty label. As Andrea said, I got the shy label. And what are you supposed to live up to? I'm not supposed to become a professional speaker if I've got a shy label. Again, it doesn't match up with this internal perception of self. What's the societal or organisational messages coming into work? Does any of you have this? Oh my goodness, I work at the MRC LMB. Yeah? It's like, what a cool place to come to work, but it's also what an intimidating place to come to work, perhaps. So sometimes it's the societal or organisational messages, where you're working, the environment as you step through those wonderful doors and see this. I mean, I was saying to Andrew, beautifully wide corridor as you go down. It's like, spacious, but should I really be here? Do I belong? Those sorts of things go through your mind. Unless you see somebody like you, and that can be from a diversity issue, it can be neurodiversity, it can be a disability issue, but it could be anything. So there's lots of protected characteristics, but equally one lady came up to me after a talk in the City of London and said, "So me, Kate, I was brought up in a council house in the north of England. People like me don't go to work in the City of London." She is, and she's doing a very good job. But sometimes the people like me don't do things like this, even though you are doing it. So the lack of role models. And one point that I would love you to take away as well from this session is, if you can't see the role model, then please be the role model for the next folk. Really important to have some role models. Feeling other, so it can be anything that makes you feel other, anything that sort of has that external, like, oh, I don't really fit, I don't belong, I'm not good enough, attachment in your heads. Because this is where it comes from. It's not actually there in the evidence. You got the job, you interviewed for this, you nailed it, you already are here. But sometimes that's not matched up inside our own heads. So there's who do you choose to see yourself as being? And as I've put there, this hashtag, Choose to Challenge, was International Women's Day's hashtag a couple of years ago. And I think it's a really good hashtag. Choose to challenge the perception you have of yourself. Have you updated yourself to who you are now? I dread to tell you how many years ago it was that I failed that 11+ exam. But I was 10 at the time. I'm an August baby. So I took it at an age that my younger and older sister were much older when they took it. It's like, maybe that's why I failed the 11+ exam. Maybe I'm not quite as thick as I think I am. Maybe I can do this stuff. So we need to update ourselves into who we are now, and challenge the perception that we've got of our sometimes younger selves as to where we think we belong to where we actually are and do belong. So this is a quote that I really quite like from Thich Nhat Hanh, and apologies to him for my pronunciation of his name. But I think it's a really interesting quote, because sometimes we have the media putting this out about fix yourselves, you suffer from the imposter syndrome. No, you don't. You experience a phenomenon at certain points in time, but we tend to think we're told it's us and it's our issue and we should fix ourselves. Sometimes it's down to the environment. Sometimes it's down to the person who is leading your lab bench, perhaps. Sometimes it's just simply walking into the building. Sometimes it's what you see portrayed by the LMB, perhaps. But here we've got the quote about the lettuces, which I do like. And it's as if you plant a lettuce, and it doesn't do well, then you don't blame the lettuce. You look for the reasons for it not doing well. You look to see whether or not it needs more water, whether it needs more sun or fertilizer. You don't go, come on, lettuce, grow. Whereas in organisations, we tend to get told that sometimes, don't we? So we need to think sometimes, if you are managing others, if you have that opportunity to care and to develop other people, don't think of them as lettuces. I mean, we're not going down quite that route, but look at the care and attention that they maybe do need. Some people need more support than others. Some people are fine being told they're doing well and get on with it without that extra bit of support, but some do need some more support. So just see what the individual needs if you find that somebody is not doing as well as you think they might. And certainly in some organisations, some people will procrastinate. I don't know if you've also come across this for yourselves, but perhaps you've written a paper and perhaps it's not quite good enough. Perhaps you still need to do a few tweakings and you need to, before you put it out there. It's like, oh. And why haven't you done it yet? Well, it's not quite ready. And sometimes we miss deadlines for things because we're not quite got it good enough yet. And some people think that's lazy. But actually, it could be the imposter feelings that are triggering that behaviour. So just open up the mindset to think about what are the causes and what are the other possible causes that could be. So what can we do about it? And I would really love to give you in the next 15 minutes a quick whiz through what we can do about it. And then we'll take it to say, any questions that come, feel free to pipe up. So how can we do something about this? Well, the first one's to do what you have just started to do in the room. And for those of you in the Zoom, apologies if you didn't get that chance to talk to each other. But just thinking about when can you have an opportunity to talk to someone who will listen, not talk to someone who will tell you how amazing you are. Because if you talk to someone who's going to listen to you, they're going to ask you, where do you think it comes from? What do you think causes it? What evidence do you have that supports these feelings? What evidence do you have that contradicts these feelings? And if you are in that privileged position of being the listener and somebody comes to you, don't give them platitudes. Don't just say, what, you? Nah, you're great at your job. I've got no worries about you. Because that doesn't help. Listen to them. Help them unpick it. Ask those questions. What do you think is causing it? What evidence do you have that supports it? What evidence do you have that contradicts it? And I tell you, they will have evidence that contradicts it. Or you can provide then some specific evidence that contradicts those feelings. So talk about the masks and listen for clues. Well, challenge the self-talk. I'm going to put up a couple of boxes and see if there are any other ripples of recognition in the room. Because sometimes with this, we have people that go, yeah, I just got lucky. Or they're just being kind. You know, the interviewer liked me, that's why they gave me the job. They might like you, but that is not why they gave you the job, okay? So when I got my distinction for my first ever academic essay, they'd obviously marked it wrong. You know, that can't be right. I'm still not quite sure how I did get the distinction overall, but, you know, it's quite an interesting dilemma when we have the successes, we put it down to somebody else making a mistake. And then we sometimes, if it's not luck, it's hard work. And we put the successes down to hard work. And we need to challenge this because success is not just about hard work or luck. Success involves some knowledge, some skills, and some abilities, as well as a little bit of luck and a little bit of hard work. But we tend to dismiss the role our own internal knowledge, skills, and abilities play. So that's what I'd like you to come think about. What have I done? What have I brought to this? So I'm just doing my job. What's wrong with that sentence? What word needs to come out of that sentence? Shout it out quickly. Just, yeah, just. So I am doing my job. Not I'm just a, I'm only a. Take that out. I am doing my job. Taking out the qualifying words. Oh, if I can do it, anyone can do it. I'm not going to dispute that others could, but you are the one who is. And it's not anyone that can do it. That's definitely not true. But you are the one who is doing it. So think about challenging this self-talk. And then this is a three-step process that I would really like you to take away and give some at least thought to, so in the think about box, if not in that start box. So show of hands in the room and a show of hands, thumbs up online if you would. Who already keeps their positive feedback? Anybody keep positive feedback? I'm going to hope that you get some. Okay, so who already keeps it when you get it? So I've got about 4 hands in the room. Have we got any hands up online? No? Keep it. Do you have a record of it somewhere? Do you store it in an email folder? Do you print it off into a file? Because sometimes people keep it in their heads, but that's not quite good enough. Because when you have a bit of a stress mode, you can't access the evidence that's positive. Yeah. So what I'm going to suggest is, so we have some of you that keep it, great. Have you looked at it recently, let's say in the last 3 months, for something other than a confidence boost or an interview for something? Have you looked at it recently, if you keep it? I've got 0 people looking at it. Okay, I've got some shakes. So 3-step process. The first step for most of you in the room is to start to keep your positive feedback somewhere. So you set up an email folder and you call it Wonderful Me, brag file, or mine is simply called feedback. You can call it what you like, but call it something that you keep your positive feedback in, not just all your feedback, but your positive feedback. Then review it on a regular basis. If you seriously want to challenge the imposter feelings from the inside, you need to look at the external evidence of success. The external evidence is there in that positive feedback. So have a look at that. And when you look at it, stop, yes, but they're just saying it. Yes, but they're being kind. Yes, but they tell everybody that, wouldn't they? Stop doing that and start to yes and the feedback. And yes and, I don't mean, yes, and, aren't I wonderful? Hey, look at me. I'm not thinking of that sort of thing. But yes, and, I've learnt this from that situation. Yes, and, I can see my skill or my knowledge in this is growing. Yes, and, I can see this is becoming a strength of mine because it's some feedback that I'm getting regularly. Yes, and, it was difficult, but I'm pleased with the result. So you're yes anding the feedback, rather than pushing it away to allow it on the inside. Remember, the imposter feelings come despite the external evidence of success. So we need to challenge the internal perception of the self. And Roy Baumeister in the year 2000 produced a paper which is one of the most widely cited in the field of positive psychology. He said, bad is stronger than good. That's the title of the paper, and I think that's why it's cited, because it says everything you need to know. We remember the negative feedback. It's like, yes. But the positive feedback, when we need to, come back to the point about what do I mean when I say keep it, when we think, yes, I'll remember that, when something happens, when we have a feeling and we want to challenge it, it's really hard to access the positives. It's very easy to access the negatives. So we need to keep the positives. But when we're talking about confidence, if we want to grow our confidence, we can look at going to the positive feedback. This particular situation, I'm experiencing a little bit of a wobble. I don't feel that great about it. Let me review my positive feedback. It will give me a boost. That's great for confidence building. But if we have the feedback that we've got and we really want to challenge the imposter feelings, we need to do it on a much more regular basis, which is why I suggest you review it maybe every month, maybe every fortnight. Maybe somebody wants to put a calendar reminder out and review it every week. It is up to you. But when you review it, yes and it. So that's a 3-step process. Keep it, review it, yes and it, which will really help. Now, feedback that says how great you are, how amazing you are is, I was going to use a word that went CRAP. Okay, it's not good feedback. But feedback that is very specific is really helpful. So when you're giving somebody some feedback, if you use the word strength in the feedback that you're giving to the other person, and I see X as a strength of yours, and I see the attention to detail as a strength, or I see your expertise in this particular area as a strength of yours, it bypasses something that I'm terming the imposter filter. It sort of goes, oh, really? Thank you. So we have knowing and understanding your strengths is really useful. And giving strengths-based feedback to others is also really useful. But sometimes you receive feedback that isn't that specific. You've done a great job, thanks very much. I don't know what was great about it. So when you have that type of feedback, perhaps there could be going back to the person who's given you the feedback. Thank you very much for that feedback. I know you said I've done a great job. What I'd really like to understand is what made it great in your eyes so I can do it again next time. Then you can get something that's really specific. That's the bit that they see that I do. Because otherwise, we don't tend to know. So challenge some of that more waffly feedback. And what I'd like to do is, for those of you who are online, could you put now into the chat one thing that you are good at? So we're going to just talk very briefly to each other, back into the groups that you were in a moment ago, and say to each other one thing that you are good at. That's it. It's about a 2-minute exercise max. Okay, so quickly turn to each other, one thing that you are good at. Go. And online, if you could list it into the chat, if you've got some. We need more from the online folks. When you're in Zoom, I don't know if you can see it. There is sometimes there's a sound for musicians in this top corner. Usually it's off. If you can see it, could you turn it on? It doesn't matter if you can't. Okay, don't worry then. Okay, let's end that experience and let's just unpick it a bit. Because again, I don't need to know what you actually said. What I'm interested in is how you felt. And I could tell some of your feelings, could I not? When I said this is what we're going to do, would you now into the chat in Zoom like to put how you felt? And in the room, would you like to share a little bit of how you felt? So we initially had vulnerable for the first one when you were exposing, but I'm not so sure it was vulnerable that was this one, was it? No. Did anybody go, ah? A bit of an eek, what am I good at? I can't think of anything. Yeah? Really uncomfortable because you're talking yourself up. We're not used to that, are we? Because some of the societal messages said pride comes before a fall. Nobody likes a smart ass. Don't get too big for you. Sorry, don't get too big for your boots. All of that sort of stuff. We're like, got to be humble, got to put ourselves down a bit. C.S. Lewis purportedly said, didn't actually say, but the Swan postcard's got the quote on it. He apparently never really said it. He said something like it. But true humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is thinking of yourself less, which is quite interesting. So how else did you feel? What else went on in your sort of, as you were going to say yours, how did you feel? Could you put that into the chat as well? And Callum, if you see any feelings, would you like to shout them out? So shout out, how did you feel when I told you what the exercise was? Awkward. Did anybody else in the room feel awkward? Yep. Okay. What else? Embarrassed, worried. Yeah? Worried about what?
Because I think automatically I think of instances where whatever quality it is, that I didn't fulfill that quality.
Yes. So if I say I'm good at this, and they'll find an experience where I didn't actually do it that well. Yeah? It's like, we fear judgment, don't we? And we also think we shouldn't boast. So we stick for something safe. Did any of you do, I'm good at listening? I'm good at attention. Yes? Got it. I know. Somebody generally does. I'm good at attention to detail, perhaps. Something like that. Yeah? Yeah? It's a safe one. Yeah? It's really interesting. But I mean, again, I don't need to know what you did say. But what I would like you to now tell me is when you were listening to others, assuming you got past the awkwardness and you found something, when you were listening to the others say what they were good at, how did you feel when you were listening? So if you'd like to put that into the chat, please do. And how did you feel when you were listening in the room? She was right. You can see it. Yes, that is what you're good at. Yeah? Jealous. There's a little bit of envy. It's like, oh, I wish I had that. But it's also really useful to know if somebody is good at it. And if you need some help on it, it's like, oh, I now know who to go to. Yeah? Anything else? Yeah, positive and excited because they're talking about something that and you can see sometimes in their face, this is what I'm good at. And they tend to go and explain why. And you have a little bit of an uplift. Generally speaking, understanding your strengths and using them at work helps you feel more engaged in the workplace, helps reduce attrition in the workplace, helps increase the immune system even. There's a remarkable amount of research done on the use of strengths, but also what happens when you use your strengths and knowingly use your strengths in the workplace. You can reduce your imposter feelings because you know, I am good at. But I bet you didn't say that. Some of you will have said, I think I'm good at. Or I'm quite good at. Or other people tell me I'm good at. So those are some of the caveats, but what I would really like you to go away with and think about your strengths is to say, I am good at this. I know I'm good at this. I know I'm not good at this, that's okay. But I am good at this. And on the webpage, there's some links to some strength profiles. So if you wanted to, you can take a questionnaire to know and understand your strengths. If you want to, you keep your positive feedback and it will tell you over time what the threads are. You can ask others, You can ask others and they will tell you what your strengths are, or you do know them on the inside anyway. But I would encourage you to own your strengths, to knowingly use them in the workplace. So there are a few more things that I'd like to come to before we finish, go through before we finish. One is about this comparison of self. So coming back to your point about jealousy, it's like that comparison of self to others, finding self lacking. What one of my research participants did was a wonderful comparison that was so different from this piece that most people do. Oh, and as it's Christmas coming up, I'll recommend a Christmas present for you. If you haven't got it already, a little copy of Charlie Maxey's book, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse. It's a wonderful little book, full of cartoons, and it's an adult cartoon book. It's like fab. But in there, the boy is asking the mole, what do you think is the biggest waste of time? And the mole, who loves cake, and the mole replies, comparing yourself to others. That's what we do a lot. And when we have the imposter feelings, we compare ourselves to others and find ourselves lacking. What my participant did, one research participant, she compared herself to others and thought, they're meeting the bar that's here. I'm working this hard. But actually, if their bar is acceptable, am I not working a tad too hard? Maybe I'm putting extra effort in. Maybe I'm getting near burnout. Maybe I ought to reduce my effort a little. Not, I'll only work to the bar that's acceptable, but I'll just work above the bar slightly rather than push myself extra hard. And I thought that comparison was an interesting one. But what I would suggest you do is also think about comparing yourself to yourself. So over time, you would be, okay, this is me, my 11-year-old self, but actually was 10 when I took the 11 plus. It's like, if I'm now way over here because time has gone on, I can't compare myself to that one. I mean, that's a daft, I've learned so much since then. So what you think about is, what have you learned in the last week? You know, if you compare yourself to this time last week, what have you learned? What things have you developed? If you compare yourself to yourself last month and this time last year, there'll be huge amounts of learning. But we don't tend to stop to do that. We tend to go, oh, I still don't know enough. Oh, I still haven't learned, da-da-da. So compare yourself to yourself and start to come back to this point that I made at the beginning. Start to update your view of yourself, to rethink that, to go, okay, I now know this. I don't know everything, but I do now know this. So if you could do that comparison would be really healthy. Mentoring in research really indicates that actually having a mentor can be helpful, because a mentor gives you unbiased feedback. So if you have a mentor, fantastic. If you have an unofficial mentor, look around the space, look around the environments that you work in and thinking, you know what, they're doing a really good job and I'd quite like to be like them. If you get the chance to grab a cup of coffee, not would you be my mentor, but just have the conversations with people and understand how their career trajectory has gone. And having them as an unofficial mentor can be really helpful. So yes, official mentoring sometimes really works. For others, it's the unofficial mentoring that can be really helpful. So if you can find a mentor, fantastic. There are 2 words that I need to whiz through, okay? The P word. Those in the room, do you want to shout out what you think the P word might be? Perfection. If you have imposter feelings, we tend to want to be perfect. Do you remember I said earlier, you're not. You're human. We will make mistakes. But the problem is, when we go with the imposter feelings, we think we've got to get everything right, preferably first time. Science doesn't work like that, does it? So why should we as human beings work like that? But sometimes we need to think about that, revisiting that perfection rule. This is a challenge for people, okay? And I do recognize this as a challenge. But thinking about my lady who said, this is where the bar is, instead of working this hard, I will work this hard. If you worked to 80% of your imposter feelings, I've got to work to this amount, maybe you'd hit the 100% of the just good enough club. So could you pull back a little bit and let go of some things and let go of that need to be perfect? Could I suggest you send out drafts for people to think about, to review? It's scary still. I've just had a meeting last Friday with my supervisors on that first draft of my thesis. They've all commented. But actually the comments are really useful to create a formed final draft. One chapter I thought needed loads of work on, they've come back and not said it's done, but pretty much it doesn't need the work I thought it did. So there's me. I would have spent loads of time in the wrong place. So sending people drafts, getting that feedback and understanding can be really helpful. Letting go of that need to be perfect. And then the other word that we need to talk about before we go is the F word. The failure one. If I don't get it right, I'm a failure. And it's that if it fails, I am a failure. When I did my master's, I interviewed 12 entrepreneurs, 6 men and 6 women, and I got 10 of them telling me that failure wasn't failure, it was things that didn't work. And they learnt from it and moved on. We need to rebrand failure conversations into learning conversations. I know they tell you that fail stands for first attempt in learning, but really on the inside we don't feel like that. But we need to start to really think about how we're viewing failures and having conversations of things that didn't work. The same thing as you did now with the talking about the imposter feelings, because you'll have the conversations and they'll be going, oh, that's really interesting. I wouldn't have seen that as a failure. I'd have seen that as da-da-da-da-da, progress steps or whatever you term it. But getting somebody else's view on it rather than holding it in on the inside. So as we rapidly, because I know you've got a 2 o'clock. Okay, come to a close. What did I learn? Your stop, start, think about and carry ons. I just encourage you to make a note of something that you would do differently as a result of being here. And if I leave you with 2 thoughts, you've got a postcard that has this particular quote on it. You can choose courage or you can choose comfort, but you can't choose both. So could you be courageous in changing the way you think about yourself? The other part that I'm researching, the imposter phenomenon and psychological courage, the way in which we view ourselves. It's not easy to update that self-view. It takes a little bit of courage to do it. So I would encourage you to go forth and be courageous. And please do take a look at the webpage. If you wish to contact me from there, or if you've got any other questions, then please do stay around, ask those questions. And online, for those of you online, if you would like to ask any questions into the chat that haven't been answered, then I will collect those through and I will update the webpage. Won't be until Thursday of this week because I'm out for the next 3 days out of office, but it will get updated by the end of this week if you've got extra questions. So thank you so much for your attention. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being online. And please go and keep the confidentiality of what you've heard from others, but spread the word a little bit. Thank you. So if there are questions in the room, please feel free to ask them. If somebody needs to dash, feel free to dash. That's absolutely fine. Anybody got a question that you want to ask at this point? Any questions coming through into the chat? Yeah. So, oh, you were so amazing at what you did. We're so sorry that you're leaving. And yeah, we'll really miss you. And because it's not specific. Yeah.
I'm thinking if those people saw me now, like they would be disappointed or whatever, right? In those on those points, it's actually not helping.
Yeah. So it's the positive feedback that you keep needs to be very specific, strength-based feedback, and understand that. Absolutely. Because sometimes that's why I say don't tell people that they're amazing, tell them why they are amazing. Be very specific in that. Because giving people the accolade, it makes those feelings worse. So yeah, if it's, again, that particular strategy, if it doesn't work for you, then don't do it. Focus on your strengths and look at your own strengths. Or focus on having conversations with somebody else or a mentor. Find something that does, because there are a number of different ways of overcoming the feeling. It doesn't have to be just down to one strategy. Thank you.
I have a question about, you talk a lot about perfection. Definitely struggled with that a lot in my life. I'm just curious because you talked a little bit in your talk about where the imposter syndrome comes from. And you talked about parenting. But how much of that can be teased out from, let's say, kind of psychological traits of perfection that are inherent to people? Those kinds of neuroses that, you have like certain personality types. So I'm just curious what your thinking is on that, because I where I've not been critical at all. And I see myself as a child where I had to be perfect at everything. And if it wasn't perfect the first time, I just thought I was the worst, right? So I'm just curious how you would, what your thoughts are on that. Like, you know,
It's, yeah,
how much of that plays into someone having imposter
yeah,
syndrome
yeah.
later on?
So there's the Ocean 5-factor personality, big personality, whatever it's called, style traits. And actually, you talked about neurosis. The neuroticism is prevalent in people with the imposter phenomenon. Yeah, so that particular personality trait is one of the things that does have a tick box from a personality perspective. But you can work at getting over it for yourself. You can become that, it's not all about me. So that neuroticism, thinking about you and how you come back to true humility, is not thinking less of yourself, but is thinking of yourself less. So stop focusing on you and focus on the outputs, focus on what you're doing. So it is a good question. There's a couple of books on perfection that might be interesting as well if you're interested in the topic. One is Tal Ben-Shahar's The Pursuit of Perfect. Doesn't mention the imposter phenomenon at all. And he's a Harvard professor, very interesting guy who's written on it. Another guy who's done some more recent research, in a British chap, is Thomas Curran, Curran, Thomas Curran. And I can't remember the title of his book. It's got perfection. Oh, The Perfection Trap. That's what it's called, The Perfection Trap. And he's recently produced that book. He does talk a little bit about the childhood experiences and the upbringings and how that leads into perfection, but also looks at the personality traits of perfectionism. The other thing that if there were a recommendation that I would make, is actually starting to encourage either yourself or maybe in your instance, your daughter, to do something that she's not good at, to fail at something, and to learn that actually that is okay. So to play with something that you're just having and doing it for fun, you don't have to be good at it. A chap I was...
Interesting that you talk about that, because it's actually something I've tried.
Yeah. And keep doing it.
It's really helpful,
yeah.
actually, and
Brilliant.
also helpful for myself.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's great. So do it, because I had a chap on a different workshop who was talking about, he said he's bought his son a drum kit, and it's down in the bottom of the garden in the shed, but the drum kit's there. And he said he'd really love to play the drums, but he's just not sure he's good enough and going to do it. It's like, play, just have a go. The whole point is to find something that you can just have a go at, and you don't have to be perfect. But then my upbringing, and my mum, she stopped playing the piano. She loved playing the piano. I didn't know this until many moons later after she died, and my dad said she was very good at playing the piano, better than him, but he was always the one that played. And she stopped because she couldn't do it well enough, which I think is quite sad when there's something you enjoy and you're thinking you stop because you don't think you can do it well enough. It's this piece about, well, play with it, have fun with it, enjoy it. If it matters how well you do it and it's a work-based thing, then yes, learn and improve on the skills. But otherwise, just find something non-work and just play. Yeah, I think we ought to learn to fail more. And I didn't as a child. It was like, you've got to be perfect, you've got to get it right. Really hard to break that mold. But that would be the suggestion. Yeah, play with something and fail at it. Any other questions in the room?
Do you think there's anything in this middle child syndrome? Because it resonates with me. I'm the middle of 3 girls as well.
Yeah.
You're this one, you're this one, you're this one.
Yeah, according to Clance and Dimes, it's certainly a sibling. When your older sibling takes like mine took, the academic piece, you've then got to find a space for yourself. So whether that is specific middle child or whether it's certainly second child, definitely something in there, according to the research, that the first child gets a badge from parents quite often, and then the second child's got to flounder until they find their badge. Yeah, because you can't have that one because it's been taken. Strange, isn't it? Why not? Why not? You could, but we don't tend to. Oh, and if you're now parents and really worrying, two books. One is Carol Dweck's work on fixed and growth mindsets. So the book is simply called Mindsets. Really interesting, fixed and growth mindsets. She's done a TED talk as well, if you wanted to look that one up, TED.com. So Carol Dweck, and the surname there is Dweck. DWECK, Mindsets. The second one is Philippa Perry's book, particularly if you've got small children, but I still found it interesting. I bought it for my niece when my great-nephew was born. It's a bit scary having a great-nephew. And Philippa Perry's book has got a really long title. Something like, the book your children will be glad you read and you wish your parents had. I've got a nod in the room. It's something along those lines. Thank you. So, yeah, that's a really good book to understand how to not perfect your children. I'll let you go, but if you've got questions you want to come and ask directly to me before you leave the room, then again, feel free to. But thank you so much for your questions. Thank you for your attention. And please take the postcards with you and do something different. Share something with somebody else as a result of being here. Thank you so much. Pleasure. Pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, I chose D because actually all of them applied, but maybe that was the
But
wrong
that's
thinking.
okay. You know, it's actually good for everybody else to experience and understand that. So thank you anyway.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Lovely.
Bye.
Cheers. Callum, what was in the chat? Anything else at the end? Any other questions?
No, we
Nothing?
didn't have any in the chat.
And from your perspective?
Really interesting. I did expect to see more.
Yeah, that was interesting, wasn't it?
I did expect to see
thought
more.
you had, and yeah.
I do wonder sometimes whether, although recording is great, that actually people
we
go,
don't need to
we
come."
don't need to go.
Yeah, we'll look at it later.
Yeah.
But do they?
Well,
Yeah.
that's
That's the thing, you
I
don't
think
ever
it
know.
makes it gives you permission
Yes.
not
Not to
be in the
turn up and
moment.
be there. Yeah.
But it's also a great thing because there are people who genuinely can't make it and
Oh
want
yes.
to see it.
That's the other thing, isn't it? So, you know, maybe I don't know what the answer is to that, because sometimes you think, oh, do we tell them we're recording it in advance? Do you record it anyway and then they get to think, oh well, they always record them? Or do you not record them and then some people miss out? Oh, I wish I had known.
Yeah.
I find that's really difficult.
Yeah, you just don't know, do you? But actually, it was a nice group. How did you feel?
Yeah, but like you, it was interesting. I obviously gathered from the conversations that we've had that we thought there would be more in the room, but I really liked the engagement that we got from those in the room. And the fact that the row of three that were in the middle there, they were just chuckling to each other right from the get-go. I was like, oh God, that's so me. And you could hear that sort of ripple, and it gave permission to others. And there was the lady on the end that was wearing the mask. You know, I could see in her eyes that was, you know, really connecting with her and having the conversations with how they felt. You know, when I now know, having done it a number of times, you know, what people are likely to have said. And so when I throw that out, they're going, oh yeah, I did that. So that I thought was also really interesting, that they were engaged in the discussions. So much so that they didn't want to dash and had got a couple of questions, which was also interesting. I don't like consciously keeping people after the time. But
voluntarily.
Voluntarily staying and then thinking, oh, we'll ask a few questions before we go.
And before we came down, I think you mentioned about, because of the subject, maybe people are thinking, oh, I'm not going to go
So
and be
I'll watch
seen.
it online because
Yes, I can sit in a room and not be seen by anybody. But it was really interesting. The conversation that we were having was very interesting.
And that's again what I hope, you know, those who are here physically present could have that conversation. Sad that the Zoom thingy didn't quite work in the breakout side.
I did think that, just because of the way we have to dial in from from here. Yeah.
That's okay. But if they put some things into the chat, it meant that they were listening. So,
Yeah, we had some responses, which I think
had.
is good.
Yeah.